Hi everyone, and welcome to the Odd Ducklings. Today is the second day of the 7 days challenge. You might notice that I'm cheating a bit. I was out of town. We did get back home, so it might be a bit easier to do one every day, but still this is challenging for me. This is making me look at things a bit differently. I also just changed my computer, so my entire setup is not working. So even though I'm at home, I'm still using this. Not ideal for audio, but of course, this is me being effective and trying to let go of it. Success? Maybe. In any case, in today's episode, basically, I will touch on a subject that has been requested. When I started the podcast, basically, what I was focusing on is just doing interviews. And as I was doing interviews, a lot of times people were asking, why did you look for a diagnosis? Or when I was asking, what are you expecting the podcast to be having? They said, I am not sure if I want that diagnosis. I'm still considering maybe I'm autistic, maybe I have ADHD. I know I have this diagnosis, but I think it may be a combination. A lot of times it is. We know that as a fact that a lot of these conditions come together. And they keep saying, but I'm a bit concerned. So I would be happy if you could talk about why. And especially after talking to so many people, some of them became actual episodes, some of them not yet, some of them never will. I have some insights. I also did some research trying to kind of get into why this is happening. So that being said, let's get started. Why is this even becoming a question? So again, having a combination, realizing there's something that you can fix, realizing that the minute you've got one diagnosis and it doesn't fully collect everything that's wrong and everything that you want to improve in your life, then a lot of times you are looking for understanding your situation better and you run into certain conditions. And sometimes it's very valid and you really do have that condition. And sometimes it's just a way for you to find tricks and hacks of how to manage it. When I was seeking my own diagnosis for ADHD, one of the things that I loved that was told to me was, if you're going through all of these videos and all of these groups and you find that it's useful for you, then do it. Anything that could help you should help you. There's no reason not to take a hack or a trick that you found just because the title of the video was ADHD. I took that very personally in the sense of you don't necessarily have to diagnose this. Instead, you can just learn from people who experience similar things. You might not even have the condition. It doesn't matter. So before we even go to, do I get the diagnosis? Get curious. Get curious, because getting curious is the only way to move forward and actually learn ways to care for yourself. So get curious for the purpose of caring better for yourself, finding hacks, finding tricks, find what works for you. That being said, we are seeing an increase in people looking for these diagnoses or considering them. There's a massive increase on TikTok of people talking about, if you have this, you have ADHD. Some of it is even false. So as a bit of a cautious note, not everybody telling you if you have this, you have the ADHD are for sure going to be right. So do get a bit more professional advice, especially if you want to get to the point that you get medicated. Please do it in a responsible way and make sure that whatever it is you're taking is benefiting you and is not putting you in any harm's way. Because getting a diagnosis for ADHD is indeed hard, and we will go into how complicated it is in different countries more than others, of course. But it's also very important before you start taking whatever it is that they give in your country to actually get a doctor to tell you that it's okay and it's good for you. And a lot of times there's going to be a lot of tests coming with this, so don't buy this under the counter if you can. I do understand that's not always an option. And definitely don't take it too seriously when somebody on TikTok told you you probably have ADHD. That being said, don't take me too seriously. Everything on this episode and most episodes here is not professionals telling you what to do or what's right. Whoever I'm talking to and myself, we usually try to quote things from researches, But we are usually not professionals when it comes to any type of neurodivergent. So take everything we say, and specifically in this episode that I say, with a grain of salt. It is mostly an opinion. It's mostly kind of a broad way of exploring this, managed mostly by my experience talking to people and researching online. I can't validate all of the researches that I did go through. I try to be skeptical, but I am not perfect. So that being said, we have seen an increase on TikTok. We've seen an increase in actual people getting a diagnosis in the United States. It's 123% more of people who got between 2007 and 2016 compared to the previous period. So that's 23% more people actually getting diagnosed as adults. This could be contributed to multiple things, such as awareness and the social baggage that used to come with being different doesn't weigh as much. We are experiencing an increase in people being more accepting. So that's one thought as to why this could happen and why we see this increase. But another factor is just the fact that as of 2007, it wasn't official yet. I think it was only official as of 2013. But maybe I'm wrong. Don't quote me on that. There was already an acknowledgement that ADHD is something that you carry into adulthood and not just something you have as a child. So in a way, yes, it's a step that we were aware of regarding adults. But if we look at the bigger picture and not just at ADHD, we are talking about zooming in and learning more about being neurodivergent as an adult and not just the extreme non-functioning types. So we have a lot of people understanding how autism or any other neurodiversity impacts them. So we have a lot of people as adults realizing that a lot of their hardship has come from some neurodiversity, and that if they understand the pattern and where this comes from, maybe they can care for it better. Maybe they can even advocate for it better, because a lot of times when we talk about working as individuals with certain diagnosis or just being aware of being a bit different, then what we come to is, how do I communicate my needs? How do I do that in a way that supports that I am a good professional and that you want me to be working with you? For example, you can talk about the positive and negatives of having a certain hardship. Like hyperfocus is the most common thing to quote here, right? We want to be able to convey our needs in the same way that it conveys what's special about us, what we bring to the table as professionals, whatever it is that your profession is. In tech, I find that it's very easy to find accommodations, not so in other industries, and I'm aware of that. It is something that I understand that is a privilege for me. I notice that I say that a lot. I think it's really important that I stop and say that me coming here and talking very freely about being a neurodiverse person, talking about PMDD and ADHD, is because I feel like I've established myself, and a lot of that is because I work in an industry that supports this to an extent. If you feel like the place you are at is not it, I completely understand you. This is no judgment. My case is not your case. And when I say what I did and what worked for me, it doesn't necessarily mean it would work for you. So what are the general pros and cons of getting the diagnosis? I think I already touched on a bit of it. For some, it means you can get medicated. For others, it's just personal validation. When you're seeking treatment or solutions for whatever it is that you're experiencing as a neurodivergent, whether you are or not, or if you get the diagnosis or not, basically you're practicing self-care. And as you are practicing self-care, you get to a point where you can get treatment and help from the government in many cases. Especially here in Germany, there are systems that can help you more so as a child than an adult. This is still a developing concept, but it does exist. Even in work, sometimes it's easier to convey what you need if you have a name for it. It's easier for the other person to understand. You can get overwhelmed because of noise, and that you can accommodate this with earphones, for example, and then it's easier for you to manage work and be better at what you do. And sometimes it's easier if you have a name for it, because then you can just communicate this in a way that somebody is already established. On the other hand, this is not always a good idea as well. So when we come to the bad side of actually having a diagnosis is that it does come to an extent with some judgment and criticism. As I said before, there's a lot of validation that you can get from the society. It's a way that you can approach this in a more structured way because you understand how your brain works, or at least you're getting closer to it. And a lot of times this really helps, especially in work. Another episode that is being planned for this week is an episode with my husband, who is a CTO and has been managing teams in a way that is accommodating without actually having the need to put in the idea of what neurodiversity you come with or what needs you have, because it's to begin with trying to be flexible and see a person as a person. We're going to explore that a bit. But that, of course, comes from management. And if you are management, I really hope you watch that episode when it comes out in a day or two. But for now, we are talking about as individuals, not as management. When we go to work, we don't necessarily have that power, and the flexibility is something that we can ask for. And the question of how we ask for it is something that you can learn because you understand your neurodiversity and you have a community who's done that before. It is, of course, like you have two sides to this. So you might not want to state your specific neurodiversity when you go to work. I had at least one person that I was counseling, and she was considering whether to tell the potential future employee that I have ADHD. And as she was going through the interviews, she felt like this was very good for her, like it conveyed what she wanted. So eventually, when things kind of ended with her not getting the position, she really considered, was this the one thing that failed me here? And of course, I'm not naming everyone. This is a personal situation, but it is my opinion that you are the best judge of when it is or isn't impacting. And it is my opinion that in that case, it's not. And I hope you take your steps in a manner that you feel comfortable, but it's definitely a downside, and it's definitely, you never know where criticism is going to come from. And of course, if you are officially diagnosed, you don't have to come and say that at work. It is something that might come out in any medical situations. So if you are looking for a diagnosis, I don't think there's a negative side in that sense to getting the diagnosis, but there is a negative side sometimes regarding how government positions will be handled. Like maybe they wouldn't be hiring you to government positions because they are a bit biased. I don't think it's fair, but it is something that you should consider. I think it's disappearing more and more, but it is something that if you are looking for positions that this might interrupt with, this is a negative to consider. And lastly, it's really expensive sometimes to get a diagnosis, and you don't necessarily have a treatment to go with it. So, for example, when we're talking about autism, autism is not a disease. There's nothing in your brain that can be tweaked one way or another. We're just talking about a different function of the brain. It's working differently, and I know that I'm not saying it right. I am, as I said, not a professional. But as there is no treatment, it's really important to remember that a lot of what you get as a person with autism is tricks and hacks and ways of looking at things and approaching your life in a way that is reconsidering your previous point of view. You can do that without getting the diagnosis if this concerns you, or if it takes a long time or it costs a lot of money to get the diagnosis itself. So these are the pros and cons as a general idea. But when we come down to it, there are costs and risks when it comes to getting a diagnosis. And I do not want this to be the reason that dissuades you from actually getting the diagnosis. A lot of people that I talked to, they felt like getting the diagnosis was one of the most critical parts of their lives because they could kind of allow themselves to care for themselves in a certain way. And I am definitely falling under that part, but also I am very much aware that it's a bit, dumb. You don't need to wait for permission to consider yourself a certain neurodiversity. So you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis or carry on a diagnosis to start caring for yourself as if you do, and learn from the people who already went through the ropes of getting the diagnosis and so forth. That being said, it's a very long process depending on where you are. Specifically, my statistics, and I apparently was very lucky because I did not take this long, is that it takes 6 to 18 months in Germany to get a diagnosis for an adult. It also usually is being done out of pocket. For me, I was very lucky that I was already in a position with my PMDD and I got the diagnosis in context because it was impacting on both ways. And this was a way for me to see the holistic view and solve it. And it was, I realize now, very privileged once again. Sorry for overusing that word, but I don't have a better one. It's very clear to me I did not wait 18 months. I did not wait 6 months. It wasn't really postponed in any way. And I knew that I was going through the steps and it's going to be a yes or no. Also, because a lot of people are doing it privately, it's pretty expensive. And when you go through the process, you do run into the stigma of, why do you need this? Honestly, when I was going through the process, I was talking to my mom, and a lot of people were like, I don't think you have ADHD. And my mom was the first person to say, oh, maybe you have it. And that devastated me because if you could have considered me having it, and we have people in our family that have it to an extent that is very harmful to their lives, why didn't we do anything about it? And she said, yeah, you had a hard time at school and it was hard for you to concentrate. And I didn't remember any of that. It got me really angry. But then the next thing she said, oh, but you got over it. Apparently you do. I didn't think I did. She was considering me being in a position where I've solved it. I have it all kind of hacked. I don't need a diagnosis. And she really asked me, like, why do you need a diagnosis? What will this help you with? And I can't tell you exactly, I touched on this already. Emotionally, I needed this. I needed it to be verified. I needed to know that somebody whose profession it is told me, you have ADHD and we can care for it. And I did want to get medicated. Personally, for me, the medication was really important because I actually realized I had ADHD because it started becoming anxiety and I started having anxiety attacks. And it was very obvious for me that a lot of that anxiety came from this noise in my head. Like I kept having this strain, and I heard someone say that they took Ritalin once and suddenly their brain was kind of blank and they would cry. I felt emotional. I felt like I want to experience that. I want my brain to be quiet for a minute because it's sometimes it's killing you to just have that noise over and over and over. And what do you do when there's so much noise around you, but also there's inside so much noise? So all of that internalized hyperactivity is something that I really needed to kind of stop. I really wanted the medication for that. And to an extent, it took me, I needed to go a bit higher to get to the dose that would get me there. It wasn't as impactful and immediate. And I want you to know that that is also an option. So I saw that video and I started taking Ritalin and I was like, is it not working? Do I actually not have ADHD? I was still kind of questioning myself, which is also why it was so important for me to have a medical person say, yes, you strictly do have it, because me questioning myself would keep coming on again and again and again. And in this case, it didn't need to. I don't need this to come back, right? So yeah, I felt very strongly about that. And if you are in a situation where getting a diagnosis means that you can get treatment that otherwise you can't, I would say it's probably worth going for it. Again, considering everything else that we just talked about, the fees, the waiting time, the stigma that might come from government, and if that's impactful for you, and if it's at all relevant, will this impact your work? All of the above is something that you really need to take into consideration. But if you've considered this and this still works for you, I would highly recommend you push for getting any diagnosis, trying to understand what you're going through. It's a bit hard because a lot of times when we come to a diagnosis, we come as adults with, I think I have ADHD, I think I have X, and it kind of streamlines us to get just these diagnoses that we know. So I think if you can avoid naming what you have and just describe the hardship, I would go forward with that and try to get a diagnosis that is wider. It is harder, so don't take my advice if you really feel like you need support now. But if you do have that time, I would do that. I would try and get something that's a bit more wide. I remember as a teenager, I did this diagnosis and I remember nothing because I was an annoying teenager and I didn't want to get the diagnosis. I just remembered the good stuff, how they told me how smart I am. But there were a bunch of like, here's where you were having a hard time. Like I'm swapping letters, I have dyslexia and stuff, or like I'm adding an E at the end of some words for absolutely no reason. Like I know how to write book. Why is there an E at the end? I know English is not my first language, but that was pretty basic. Somehow the more complex words were easier, but the more simple words did not kind of connect. It was a very complex kind of feedback that I got, and I wish I was more there to receive it. And I wish I would have had the time or money to do this today. I'm not going to do that because I don't see the value immediately. But if I was to do the diagnosis for ADHD again, I might have just gone for that to see the big picture, to understand what it is, because I do want to keep on to academia and I want to understand how to manage it. So maybe at some point I'll do that as well, but it is a recommendation that I'm putting out there for you. Lastly, there's a few questions I'd like you to ask when you come to the point of reaching out for a diagnosis. Mainly, what is your personal goal here? A lot of times when we are looking for a diagnosis, we are at a place in our lives where things are not exactly good. And we need to also remember that even if things are not great, it's not the be-all end-all solution. You do have a lot of work to do on yourself that has nothing to do with whatever it is you have as a diagnosis. Yes, this could help, maybe. Don't build the expectations too high. I can tell you with my PMDD, for example, when I finally got a name for it, I had to still manage this. And again, I was working a hardcore management position as a person with PMDD. I don't think it's impossible to be a functioning PMDD person. I even have some interviews in the queue that I still need to edit of people that are, and more people that I will be interviewing. So having PMDD does not mean that I didn't function, but things were getting harder and harder and I was getting burned out. So there was a bit of a rush there. And when somebody told me, we're going to give you that medication, I was really having my expectations up, how it's going to fix me and everything's going to be great. The same thing kind of happened when it came to working with ADHD and getting the Ritalin medication. And it never does. Whether you're fighting depression or anxiety or whatever it is that you have, if you're overwhelmed, there are medications out there and they can help, but just ask yourself, how much weight are you putting into getting this diagnosis to get yourself fixed? Because you don't need fixing. I think we've said that a couple of times, especially in the previous episode. You don't need fixing. You are a full and wonderful individual as you are, which is not to say there's no place for improvement, but it's not fixing that you're looking for. You're looking for bettering your life. And there's no one tool that's going to do this. It's not going to be a notebook that you have. I have too many of these that I purchased just for solving how I manage my life. It's not going to be the one thing to solve it. It's going to be a mix, and you're going to have to try a lot of things. And if you're trying medication, if you're going for a diagnosis for getting this treatment that you can only get with a diagnosis, ask yourself, how much weight am I putting on this? And how much am I waiting to start my treatment because I don't have this diagnosis? And then I would tell you, don't wait. Start caring for yourself. Start therapy if that's the way that you want to go. Start whatever it is. Try a lot of things. Try and fail. We're failing upwards. We're trying new things. Trust me, I am once again trying another pill and I am still really hoping it's going to fix my life. And I can swear to God, it's not. It's not going to fix me. It's not going to fix you. And we're going to have to live with this. Okay, so once you've got to this point where you say, okay, I know it's not going to fix me, but I still feel like it would be very meaningful. And I'm with you. I still feel it's meaningful, even if it didn't fix me. Because again, no fixing. There's no need for it. You need to also look at the diagnosis and think, what is it as a tool? Again, if it's something that I want to use, if it's something for my own personal point of view, ask yourself, is that my goal? Is that something that I can use? And be practical about what it's going to give you. Kind of weigh in the emotional impact of getting a diagnosis. I know we haven't touched on that because we touched a lot about technical stuff and societal impact and work impact, but if you get the diagnosis, will it break you or will it give you energy? And I don't think I can say this in any other way. I think I was terrified that getting the diagnosis would make me feel broken. And if you in any way feel like that's the case, if you feel like I'm concerned regarding getting this as a part of my identity, I am concerned about getting a diagnosis, I really want to help, I really want to understand myself, but does that mean I'm broken? So again, nothing to fix, you're not broken, just thinking differently, and you need to learn how to work with that. A lot of us think differently, and there's a lot of discussions out there like this, everybody's neurodiverse, which is to an extent kind of true. But the point is, if everybody's neurodiverse, then why are we trying to teach everybody to just behave the same way and have this neurotypical approach to everything? So what you are giving yourself as a gift here, if you are choosing to get a diagnosis, is, and again, just an opinion. Everything that I said so far, it's just my opinion, and that is absolutely okay. So with that in mind, you are giving yourself something that should emotionally help you. And if you are concerned regarding the impact that it would have on yourself and telling other people in your life, I would suggest trying some therapy first, getting yourself to a place where you are strong enough to handle it. Don't break yourself for a diagnosis. Care for yourself before you get the diagnosis. Again, a diagnosis is just a tool, and a tool at the wrong time can be really problematic. If I can ask anything of you, is just consider where you are in your life and if this is beneficial or if it's going to hurt you, because we definitely don't want to hurt you. We want to build you up. You are great. You are neurodiverse in the sense that so many people are neurodiverse. I don't know if everybody, I don't care if everybody is, but the idea of being aware of neurodiversity is just to be aware that there's more than one way of doing things. And we're getting there on a personal level, on like work level, and this is one step in the right direction. You considering whether or not you want a diagnosis, or you consider for somebody else if they want a diagnosis. This is the first step. Last thing I want you to ask yourself before you hit the road and start looking to get a diagnosis is, what is it going to cost me? And at this point, we are being a bit practical because we've already weighed how much it's going to cost me mentally, or how much it's going to cost us with the self-perception that we have of ourselves, and how much it's going to give us potentially, and being a bit realistic about that as well. But there is a technical side here. You're going to have to spend a lot of time finding the right doctors, and sometimes fighting the right doctors to get to the right doctors, seeing more and more. I spent over a year moving from one doctor to another just to get a PMDD diagnosis, and none of the doctors that I went to during that year, and it was a lot of doctors, knew what PMDD even was, because if they did, it was such an easy case to recognize, but nobody knew what it was. Sometimes what you have is not easy to diagnose. Sometimes they just don't want to. There's still, sadly, a lot of doctors that don't believe ADHD is a thing. You might run into these if that's where you're going. Same for autism, dyslexia, and so forth. I am sticking to the ones that are coming off the top of my head. So if I am missing some sort of neurodiversity that you feel I need to highlight, let me know. I'll make sure to say it more. This is a 7-day challenge, and I do find it hard to make this video and edit it on time. Not even sure I'm managing to do it on time. So semi on time, ADHD style. You just need to figure out if the cost, it's financial cost, it's time, it's how much your insurance is covering, it's how much your government is going to make you suffer to get that, and if you're aiming for getting benefits from your government, how hard is that going to be? And you need to weigh in if that is worth it. I want you to stop and do that before you hit the road. I know it's hard because you want some sort of a solution, but it's really important to weigh in that this is something that you want enough, or that is important enough and impactful enough for you that you need the diagnosis and you need to go through that, because sometimes it's expensive, time-wise, money-wise, etc. So once you've done that and you've considered everything we said, and you thought if diagnosis is something that is helpful for you, or if you just want to explore this idea of who I am as X, Y, or Z, there's always a lot of communities that would welcome you. to be talking about it and to be considering whether it's a good fit or not. A lot of times these communities are way ahead of your doctors to give you highlights of what is a new treatment that's going on, what are some new ideas to try. It's going to build you up even if you don't get the diagnosis. So if you're considering a diagnosis and it's too expensive, consider just starting with going into these communities. I use Facebook. That's how old I am. Or maybe it's just because I live in Germany and it's really useful in Germany. But in any case, I really think it's a good approach, even if you don't end up having a diagnosis, or even if you just started considering it and you still need to process what it means for you and look into all of these details. So take that as a consideration as a first step to getting a diagnosis. I think this is all I have for you for today. I really appreciate the time that you spent here, if you did. If you liked what you got, please like, subscribe. It's a very small channel, so if you happen to run into this channel, thank you so much for watching, especially if you got all the way here. I know it's not easy and most people don't. Really appreciate that. And let me know how I can improve, because honestly, I'm just taking it one step at a time, and this is the first step. Help me out. If you want to help out a fellow neurodivergent or just a person trying to kind of bring positivity to the world, whatever it is that you have to say, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you so much. We will be getting back to having more interviews in the future, not this week because this week is a bit different. But for now, stay odd and have a great one. Bye.